Good evening, everyone. My name is Jake Usna, and I am the content producer here at The Walker. And
my name is Taylor Jasper, and I'm Assistant Curator of Visual Arts here at The Walker.
And on behalf of both of us, we'd like to I would just welcome you to the first in our series on nightlife as form. Taylor and myself have been very fortunate to be given the space by The Walker to do this series of free programs through the summer that celebrate nightlife as an art form, but specifically recognize and celebrate the history and impact of queer nightlife in the Twin Cities. We start every program at The Walker by acknowledging that the Walker Art Center is located on the contemporary, traditional, and ancestral homelands of the Dakota people. This site, which was once an expanse of marshland and meadows, holds meeting for Dakota, Ojibwe, and Indigenous people from other Native nations who still live in our community today. As I mentioned, nightlife and this lovely logo that was designed by our design fellow Andrew, who's in the audience. I'm going to there we go. Woo! I'm going to call out. Nightlife Forum is a collection of free programs going out summer, as well as paired with free online articles that are tracing the history of queer nightlife, not only locally, but throughout the country. Two of our series, I think there's probably going to be quite a few of them by the time we're done, but the first two have already been published. The first one is by Michael Musto and Rob Roth, looking at kind of the evolution of nightlife in New York over the last 40 years. And then Wadena Moore, the activist, drag performer, and artist of San Francisco, kind of did a similar one, looking at the evolution of queer nightlife in San Francisco from the 1970s to today. But in person, the next panel we'll have is on July 11th at 6 p.m., and that is an oral history of Minneapolis queer nightlife, where we invited a younger practitioner, DJ Sci-Fi, to ask us who were the kind of elder statespersons that inspired and taught them, and that was Venus DeMars and Shannon Blowtorch. And we asked Shannon and Venus who inspired them, and that was Ed Varga, who founded HomoCore Minneapolis in the 90s. And so all of them will be coming together for that evening to kind of talk about the evolution of alternative queer nightlife in the Twin Cities. That'll be followed on August 1st by a free screening entitled If You Label Me, You Negate Me, Nightlife and Identity in Moving Image, which is a collection of films by queer filmmakers about queer nightlife, starting with what Kenneth Anger called the first queer film made in America, which, like, maybe. But from 1947, we're getting a print of Fireworks. We're also going to be showing Lisa Ganzer's documentary from 2001 about HomoCore Minneapolis, as well as a few other fun tidbits. And then we were going to wrap up the series on August 22nd with Linda Simpson's Drag Explosion. For those who aren't familiar, Linda Simpson is kind of an iconic drag performer and artist based in New York City, has been there since the late 70s, early 80s, and not only with their own performance, they're also kind of like the de facto documentarian of drag and queer nightlife in New York, who's been always have a camera in hand documenting, and they've had 2 books of photography come out. The most recent one was called The Drag Explosion, and they're going to be coming back because they're originally from the Twin Cities. They'll be coming back to do a one-person show, as well as they're making an original zine that they will be doing a free signing of. And then after that, on the same night, we're going to have some local queer drag artists and performers performing in Cargill right after. So hopefully you can join us for some of that. There's also a whole bounty of summer social programming going on throughout the entire summer. It's every Thursday night. It's all on our website. There's more than you would ever want to hear me talk about. But it's great stuff. I really recommend you check it out. One I'll plug very quickly is Party for Life, which is building on some of the AIDS activism, HIV and AIDS activism seen in the Keith Haring exhibition that is now on view, but we'll be bringing in some local organizations who are continuing to make an impact about HIV and AIDS awareness and activism throughout our neighborhoods. And then since this is the kind of kickoff one, I just kind of wanted to talk about nightlife very briefly before we introduce our panelists. And nightlife is a thing that's really existed since at least the birth of the 20th century. It goes back to some of the jazz clubs, what we now would consider dive bars, and a lot of other spaces that were created by and for queer people, as well as others that have been historically marginalized. But actually, there's a good argument that traces back to the birth of civilization. Recent-ish things in archaeology in the last 20 years or so have kind of flipped the idea that people first started coming together. Originally was thought to trade. I come in, I have crops, they'd see markets, but they're actually finding older sites that date back many, many hundreds and thousands of years before that were really the first beginnings of civilization where people came together to do rituals and dance and have shared collective experiences. So at least for me, I like to say that nightlife started when civilization started. But it's really, nightlife is a thing that has been supported lots of artists working in different mediums, whether visual artists, musicians, performers, kind of everything in between, but often was relegated as not an artistic practice. So it's a thing that only recently some arts organizations and spaces have begun to recognize, and we're really happy that the Walker is kind of supporting our effort to continue to recognize that. And we just really want to, in kind of that spirit, welcome our panelists, our wonderful panelists this evening, who will be continuing conversation of their work, as well as just looking at the state of nightlife as an art form and a practice in the Twin Cities today. And I'd like to start by introducing Nadirah McGill of Gully Boys and Queer Mud Wrestling. They are also the organizer of musicians and performers as part of Teacup, which is the Twin Cities United Performers. We also have Marcela Michelle, who's a community-engaged transdisciplinary artist, educator, facilitator, and producer. Her artistic practice spans mediums and genres, engaging dance, music, physical and scripted theater, design, burlesque, literature, construction, performance, theory, composition, devising, and the culinary arts. She is a Jerome Hill Artist Fellow in the inaugural Combined Artistic Fields. They're a Hennepin Trust teaching artist in residence, a mentee of the National Institute for Directing and Ensemble Creation, and a member of the Actors Equity. Among many other things they've done, they are also the beverage co-director with Mama San Bartending Collective, who, for those of you who are able to come to the Sadie Barnett New Eagle Creek Saloon when we had the operating queer bar further down, Mama San was our bartenders in residence, so you might recognize Marcela. And finally, we have Navarro of Gothess. And Madi is a non-binary artist and creator of Gothess. They invest their time in creating spaces focusing on inclusion for their BIPOC queer siblings. They grace the DJ altar under the alias DJ Q and have been a DJ for over a decade. They originally are from Chicago, where they first found their love of the goth subculture, which is me and Taylor also representing this evening. And saw freedom in the subculture brought by challenging all of the binaries. They started their DJ career in Portland, Oregon, where they were active in the goth scene, playing at places like the Star Theater and Hive. And they were also the resident DJ at the Coffin Club, Portland, Oregon's horror-themed bar. And now they are very grateful to all the opportunities Minneapolis and the Twin Cities community has brought them. So please join us in welcoming.
All right. It's so good to be seated up here with you all. To get us started, I thought maybe once I open my notes and see what it is that I actually want to ask, we could start by talking about how did y'all come to work in nightlife, and how do you approach nightlife as practice?
I can start. I came to work in nightlife, honestly, by accident. I was a dancer, and I was a huge fangirl. I would go to shows and sleep outside of venues because I wanted to be a part of something, and it was a place that I could let loose and be myself, especially as a Black and queer person who went to school in the suburbs where with a lot of white people, I could go into the city and let my freak flag fly. And so as I got older and was able to actually join the club scene, I started dancing with this group called Tickle Torture, and I was a go-go dancer for a few years, and I fell in love with it. I was like, this is the all it takes to actually get people in the room for the show of the event made my brain so happy. And then I went to school for business so I can keep doing shows and make them work. So that's how I started. And then I am a musician, so it was sustained through playing in Gully Boys. And then also just through like the organizing work that I've done, I really like to focus on joy. And so that's how queer mud wrestling came about, and centering joy amongst like pressure and like fighting and physical engagement, but still doing it within community and with smiles on our faces. So I think that's also how I approach my practice. I really like to center joy. I feel like a lot of what I see in the world and what I hold as a person of many marginalized identities is a lot of pain and grief, and it feels really beautiful to have a space to smile and be around people who look like me and feel that same heaviness, but also for a moment, just that can suspend and we can just be enjoy and play together. And yeah, I think that's always what has been my shining star, and what I've tried to go towards is finding the joy and creating that joy if I wasn't feeling it in my own spaces, making space for that to exist. And queer mud wrestling was something that started in me and my partner's backyard as a joke. And now it's on our third year and it's like bigger and better than ever. And it started because we wanted to have joy at a really dark time. And people wanted to be a part of that as well. And it feels so special. And I feel so honored to be able to share that with people.
That joy is so important, and the catharsis as well. Thank you for saying that. Hi, everybody. I'm Marcela. How did it happen? I dropped out of high school and joined the circus. I dropped out of high school in 2010, and I moved to a small town about an hour north of here called St. Cloud. Do not recommend. And I started getting involved there in whatever I could. There was a small theater with a bar attached called the Pioneer Place Theater, and they had a variety show, like a monthly variety show, SNL type thing, and I would write sketches and perform in those sketches. I grew up in the arts in a really transdisciplinary way, singing, acting, dancing, writing, all that good stuff. And I was doing like mime performances, like mime burlesque hybrid performances, because I was a mime student as a preteen. Shout out Beverly Johnson, one of my first mentors. And while I was there, I met someone who used to go by the name of Scarlet Revolver, who now goes by Davey Havoc, if you're familiar with the local burlesque scene. And they were a circus performer, a hula hooper, and a fire performer, and they were just starting to get into burlesque. And they saw my mime work and said, hey, I want to start like a dark circus, kind of, freaky, creaky, creepy, sexy cabaret type thing. Do you want to be a part of it? We had like a magician, like a dark magician who did like piercing and eating glass and stuff. And there was a performer, Bombshell LaBelle, who had been doing burlesque here in the Twin Cities, specifically like hip hop burlesque. And then there was a costume designer we had who wanted to get into performing, and Davey and myself. And we formed Carnival Revolver. And I was in that troupe for a long time. And then we started getting booked here in the Twin Cities. I moved to the Twin Cities shortly after. And then I started working with Body Blue Burlesque Review and Dykes Do Drag, which was an iconic, like 20-something year dyke-centered performance collective that operated out of Bright Lake Bowl. And then I started working with Black Hearts Burlesque, and I worked extensively with Electrocute for a really long time. Started working with the Minneapolis Burlesque Festival, producing festivals and hosting. Eventually found my way to Daddy, which was a really special time in the community here, hosting and headlining shows for them. And then I took a break for a while. I stepped away from the burlesque and drag scene in 2019 to focus on my other careers in dance and theater, and to kind of clear my head. I was really young. I was underage and was partying a lot and had access to a lot of drugs and money and sex and all that good stuff, right? And
Been there.
and by my mid-20s, I was like, okay, I need to, and it was good, I think, for it to happen so early.
Totally.
Right? Like by my mid-20s, it was like
You gotta wake up.
You gotta wake up and clear your head a little bit. I got married, I got a dog, and I live a quiet lesbian life. But now that we've formed Mama San, I'm back, and I'm back in a different way. So the question of what is the practice is emergent. And it feels important to name that because so much of my practice is about holding space for the emergent, preparing as much as possible in the scaffolding of the work so that when what is emergent happens, we're ready for whatever that needs to be. We just wrapped up our residency here at the Eagle Creek Saloon, and we're excited about what's to come. And it's different. Now we're curating space. We're curating nightlife for the community, which feels a little bit more like caretaking and a lot less like I'm on stage shaking my ass, look at me. It's very different.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. It's like for me, I'm Madi from Gothess before I jump into it. So I think my background with the nightlife is kind of like, that was my mom and dad, So it's like decades of kind of not having that support. The nightlife really brought it for me in a lot of ways and in a lot of toxic ways, unfortunately. But it's like I grew up in Chicago, so it was pretty rough. You're either in a gang or you're in a party crew. So I kind of got that choice in high school where it was like, you got to be part of this gang or this one. I was like, I'm going to go with the party. But you realize really quick the party is just another gang. So it's like a trap. So growing up in Chicago, a lot of that I carry with me still, where it taught me a lot of things that I want in my life and things that I don't want in my life. And it showed me a lot about community, and it showed me about kind of like trying to find your way of, because we didn't have any models growing up. For me, it was more like, you're queer, we don't want to know anything. So there was no support. So a lot of it was like finding like-minded people to connect with that will be like, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. You're okay. You're going to get through this. And a lot of that is still with me. So with Gothess, it's the same thing. It's like, yes, we're under attack. There's a lot of things that are going on that are out of our control, but I make space for everybody to just have that moment at the end of the night and be like, this is where I'm at. This is my mood. I'm struggling. I'm struggling financially. I'm struggling emotionally. I want you to see this on the platform so you don't feel alone. So it becomes kind of like a almost pastoral role. But a lot of it comes from hardship. So it's like, I know that a lot of us on this platform don't really talk about that pain that we had to endure just to be in kind of privileged places. So for me, a lot of it has been kind of just growing up in the nightlife, finding ways of just how to kind of interact socially, because I am in a subculture, so a lot of that is more isolation than openness, which is okay. I realize that's just who I am, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I want people to kind of accept those parts of themselves. So with like growing up in Chicago, I realized really quickly I was really getting turned on a lot by music. It's a city that has like house music, has a lot of freestyle music, has a lot of like kind of mishmash of all types of genres that like I kind of really fell in love with, and a lot of the DJs there. And I was pretty shy, so I just was like, nope, I can pick a nice playlist for you, but I'm not gonna go on stage. They're like, so I had a lot of people encourage me and say like, hey, you could do this. Don't be so shy. You gotta kind of like step out of your comfort zone. And that took a while. It took a couple of years until I moved to Portland, Oregon, and I met more more people that I connected with in different levels where it was culture shock, honestly, because a lot of the people in the Pacific Northwest are pretty white. So here I am leaving kind of like this party crew kind of background and then just get thrown to the other side. So it was really a huge adjustment for me. But I found some really great people there. They were like, hey, you want to give this a shot? I'm like, sure. And I, was at the clubs pretty much every night in Chicago because it's like I said, I didn't really have a support with my family. So a lot of it was like friendships that were like, hey, we're going to hang out here. Come check out this place. There's this underground party. You should come. There's an art show. And you know the story. You just kind of follow the rabbit hole. Eventually, just kind of living in Portland, I really start kind of noticing that there was a lot of things that I wanted to change within that subculture. And a lot of it was just representation. So when you think of a goth person, you're thinking about someone pretty much tall, thin, pale. I'm like, vampires come in all the shapes and sizes. Not looking at Jake. But that's kind of like what we've been conditioned to like think is acceptable for a goth person. So I'm short, ample body, and a lot of the time I just felt kind of out of place. So I realized really quickly that taking up space, even if you didn't feel comfortable, was the best way to make a change. It would be like a ripple. Then eventually I just started finding my voice through my playlist, and like people kind of starting to respect me after like seeing what I was bringing out, and kind of like, I guess the way I carried myself, I would be beat red, but I would still be able to put words together and say like, hey, this is not okay. There's a power dynamic here. We need to change this. You want to be part of it or you don't want to be part of it. And honestly, there's a lot of people that don't want to be part of it. So I know that all of our stories kind of weave together in that way where we're like, no, there's got to be representation and it has to take up space. And there's talent in that, So for me with Gothess, it's just like, I was doing a lot of artwork and DJing in Portland, and I made like a art show that was like dollar buttons, and I came up with like this little button that said Gothess, Goth Dad, and then Gothess just stuck with me, because it's like a lot of the nights that we have, even with subcultures, they usually kick back to kind of like old ways of thinking, like Batcave. Yes, there was a period for that, but doesn't say much to me. And back then I had identified more as woman. I'm non-binary now. It's like that also was like a growing up for me that happened through Gothess and the nightlife of like coming to terms of like, how do I identify? So the nightlife really helped me with that. It's kind of interesting, but with Gothess, it was like, this stands for something, It's like when you throw it on, people were curious and they're like, what is this? Why is it Gothess? Why isn't it just another goth night or a name of like a Joy Division song or something? So I was like, I just noticed that I was doing a lot of things with intent, which I think a lot of us on this platform do. It's fun, but then you realize you do have to navigate in a different way to kind of gain that maybe validation for ourselves in some way, where it's like, yep, I did that, and I had support, or I did that without the support. So with Gothess, it was like, it's been, I think, 7 years working here in Minneapolis. And I did not expect so many people to kind of be so receptive, but I think a lot of it has been just kind of centering and having the platform be like trans women and non-binary artists, and keeping, the Jakes aside, sorry, Jake. But a lot of that is really important to me. And I think it's one of the things that like comes from a lot of pain, I tell a lot of folks, wisdom comes from a lot of pain. And I'm grateful that every night that I have like a show here in Minneapolis that at the end of the night we have like a little testimonial where we kind of get on the mic because the mic is powerful, and we just talk to the audience and say, I was in your shoes at some point, unemployed. I know it doesn't look good, but it's like here, it's kind of like a church. You can come, live that moment, but remember that we're here to build up each other, because when we navigate outside of that circle, we don't have a lot of backup. So it is really important that we have more people kind of like really being caretakers. So it's like as soon as Marcela said that, I'm like, that's how I feel. They're like my babies. And everybody's like, oh yeah, you know, aren't you like hooking up and so? I'm like, nope, those are my babies. You know, you have to have your limits, you know? It's like, I already did that in my 20s, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm good.
It feels really especially great to be up here with the two of you. Like, as we're talking, I'm like remembering so much. And like,
Didn't I tell you that?
I've had the honor and the privilege of working with both of these wonderful artists. And like, when I started coming around, you know, there was still Madame of the Arts, you know, and there was still intermediate arts. And then, you know, Madame closed and Mothership emerged. And, you know, there was really cool stuff. And something that I wanted to talk about, you know, about like nightlife in the Twin Cities, like what's special about it is that like there's the party, but like also the party is often like informed by activism and action and direct action. And like the people who are partying, like we have de-escalation training, we have Narcan training, we have abolition training, we read, you know, and like there is like a cis white gay nightlife scene here that like I don't know about, that is like not that, but like our community very much is that. There are people who are like organizers, who are direct action activists on the floor. There are scholars who are writing material, you know, and songs and chants for the people who are the direct activists. But like we are a part of like kind of a sea change that happened, because like Madame leadership, Mother leadership, like that was white, you know, it was, and like cool people, lots of love, right? And it's not about like exclusion, but like we are people who were like a part of like a shift in the culture here of like seeing more Black and brown people, more queer and trans people, more trans women, more Black and brown trans women, taking up spaces as leaders. And I'm really grateful to have gotten to have like cut my teeth really young and made a lot of mistakes really young, because like even I'm 31 and still there is like an entire generation of artists who have come to me, tears in their eyes, like I didn't know I could do this, or you carved a space for me. And I know that that's true for y'all as well, right? And it like
Absolutely.
to like be so young and to like feel that and be like, damn, like this really needed to happen. It's real, it's tangible.
I feel that a lot, especially being a musician in a band that is made up of entirely non-men. When we started, there weren't many bands that looked like us, and we really had to fight tooth and nail to be seen. So one of the things that's really important to me, like you mentioned, having a mic is really powerful. And so like if I ever have an opportunity, I want to encourage other musicians or just femmes and trans people especially, to be on stage and to like have a mic and to start a band, because like it's actually much easier to do it than you think. There's all these fake rules that you don't actually have to listen to, and I feel that so deeply in my bones. And to see so many young bands come now, who it's just like that's just part of the culture now. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's much more abundant, and I'm seeing so much more of that. And there's so many more spaces that are safe for that to exist in. It makes me so happy, because having been in this scene now for 10, 11 years, it just wasn't what it was when I entered. And to be a part and to be up here with y'all, exactly. It's been a lot of work to get to this position, but I feel really optimistic about the direction that we're heading. I know there's a lot of work to be done, but I feel really proud to be up here with both of you, because the work is being done.
I agree, and I feel the same way too. It's like I always tell folks, just press play. to be a DJ. Everybody's like, oh my God, you're so amazing. I'm like, I'm just pressing play. Yes. I was like, you could do this.
Repetition.
I know. This is all you got to do. And I agree. It's the same thing. It's like mentoring people, being like, just do it. You know, you don't have to be good at it. You just have to be on the platform.
Yes.
You know, and at some point you're going to meet people like us. They're going to be like, you know what? Give you some good feedback. Watch your back, you know, and that's the way that things start changing. Because then it's like when I got here, the goth scene was still very white and male dominated. Now I look around and it's just like everybody is just like reflecting me, you know, and that is amazing to see it in such a short span. It's not even a decade, you know, to see that kind of change. And it's amazing. Yeah, it still blows me away. And then them coming up to me and being like, oh, you know, you're such an inspiration. And I'm like, you are just as articulate as I am. Get by my side. And then if you're not, it's okay. It's going to take you a while to like be able to hold that mic, say what you want to say. You know, it's like I have a lot of my DJs that I remember like 3 years ago, nonsense. You know, at the end of the night, I'd be like, okay, we're all going to say something. There's shit face and it's nonsense. There's a lot of screaming. And all of a sudden, it's like the shift changed where they're like, well, what is Madi doing? You know? And they're keeping it brief. They're going to the point. They're nervous as hell. And they start really learning. And that's the modeling that like I experienced in the nightlife, where it was like, you know, my parents didn't really show me how to date, so I had to learn from like people that probably made really bad decisions and learn the hard way. So a lot of that is just like they're modeling. And now I'm just like, I look at them and I'm like so proud of them, where they could hold space, they can articulate what they need to say. They're extremely powerful. They're putting roots. And to me, I just feel like I don't want to be famous, but I do want to be someone that's just going to ripple an effect for others, to continue to connect those dots till we're all sitting in a circle and being like, well, remember back then when it used to be that way? I'm like, it isn't anymore, you know? And it's a lot richer. And I love seeing that. So it's kind of like, I think these conversations would be really great to see that happening in other pockets in Minneapolis for sure.
Yeah. There's a not fame, but there is a certain level of visibility that's required for that to occur. You know, Jake was talking to this sort of like anthropological history of nightlife, this global history of nightlife, and yes, that's wonderful, that's great. And then there, of course, is the New York history and the San Francisco history. And what we're talking about is Minneapolis. What we're talking about is here, right? And the time period that we came up in. And so I want to be clear that like we're not trying to be ahistorical or erase the legacies of like the wonderful houses and ball cultures populated by queer, Black and brown people, trans and non-binary people on the coast. But we're talking about like the history of this place and what we came into, right? And like, you know, Venus was, of course, an inspiration for me when I got here. You know, saw Venus at Intermediate Arts. I was 21. I was like, what the fuck, you know? And was one of the first artists that like agreed to be on a showcase that I curated, you know? And Andrea also was like a big inspiration for me at the time, like when I was like, just like looking for like trans women to look up to, and specifically trans women who like weren't centering their like presentation or like style around like proximity to men. You know, I don't know if either of them like identify as lesbian specifically, but like that like just seeing that it not being about like getting a man or like attracting a man and like being in relationship with other women, cis and trans, was really powerful. But like there's something about like the necessity of this visibility and the increase in potentiality for material harm, for danger that emerges with that rise in visibility, and the pushback that is happening with the rise in visibility. You know, you look at like what's happening with Drag Story Hour. I am one of many trans artists working here in the Twin Cities who like there have been right-wing campaigns against us to call us like groomers and like predators and all of these crazy things simply because like these are the bodies that we have, and like our work is like of a prurient nature, which like maybe we'll talk about that later and what that does to funding. But yeah, I'm just curious about like how y'all have navigated that, like as your profiles like rise and as like that visibility, which is so important, like happens, like what do you do with like the backlash? Because I know when like the first time it happened to me, I like retreated. I was like so afraid, and fortunately my community like rallied around me, and I was like, oh, like it's fine. Like I got this.
I feel like for me, like it's easy for me to feel fearful and retreat similarly, and that's naturally what I want to do. But as I've gotten older and have had more permission, given myself more permission to be loud and to take up space, I have personally just tried to be, I'm in a rock band. I'm like trying to physically be louder than the bullshit that I'm hearing. And then, I mean, I think about this. One of the things that makes me think about, I guess, is this party that my partner and I just recently started called Tea for Tea for Tea. And it was a vision of theirs to have a space that is specifically for trans folks to dance and engage and touch and play and sensory like overload and sensory deprivation and eating and all these things. And we thought about that long and hard. If we are like gathering all of these trans people in one space, like that puts a target on our back and it's very dangerous. And we need to be very real about the risks that we were taking by doing that. And so we like had this is like a DIY party. Like I am in the DIY scene. So this is at somebody's house. We're making use of all the bedrooms, but making very clear that we had like a safety plan, because like the worst, we have to talk about the worst thing that can happen because it is a very real threat. And so having a safety plan and having EMTs on site and having COVID precautions, because we're protecting more than the threat of other people, but like the government failing us, and there's an active virus that is disabling us and disproportionately Black and brown and queer people. So like being very intentional about the types of ways that we are approaching safety is, I think, the best way that I can protect myself and not retreat into fear, but actually stand in like confidence and preparedness, which is like, it sucks. I don't want to have to think about that. I want to be able to just party with my friends, and I want to be able to just like let go. But I think as visibility increases, we just have to be so real about the threat that we are facing. And that's like the only way that we can protect each other and ourselves.
I agree. It's just like with visibility, there comes that target, you know? And that is something that's on my mind every single time I do an event. It's like as soon as I got on the scene and I started looking and presenting myself differently, people started treating me differently. I've gotten many, many death threats already, and it's kind of like pretty scary. I've had white supremacist groups show up at my events that we've had to get rid of. So I've had to like brush up on my history with people that I really don't care to like know their history, just to spot them. So there's a lot of education that you kind of have to go through, because yeah, we're a target, you know. We have people that are getting killed in nightclubs. So that is always on the back of my head. And every single time I do an event, I put an intention out there to a higher power, and I'm like, just give me the strength to just have the wisdom for the night, to have the community protected. Just putting that intention out there every single time. Because like to me, it matters what people's experience is on the dance floor. If I see somebody kind of like just being, you know, aggressive, I stop the music, call them out. We have the power to do those little things. I just don't turn a blind eye at all. And I also make sure that I align with venues that we might not agree on everything, but I will put them to the fire with the mic. And I'll be like, you know what, this happened to me. So if this happened to me, what is happening to someone that does not have the voice to articulate it yet, or doesn't want to be a problem? So a lot of it is just, we're kind of managing our own communities, and we're letting them know even at events. I know that at my event, anytime there's like a shooting somewhere, something happens, it's a big reminder to be almost like a PSA, like, hey, I appreciate the allies that are dancing with us because you're literally putting your life at harm. And before, it used to be like this big divide where I felt like we didn't have those allies, like it was just our community. But then I realized there's people coming to our shows that are like straight and narrow, hetero, and they're just there and they know that they're supporting us, and that might cost them their life, and that's a reality that we live with now. So I don't know how to curve that. The only way I could curve it is just call it out when you see it. Do the same model that we all do. You see something, say something. And a lot of people do come up to me and let me know what's going on, or I get the DM like at 2 a.m., this happened in the parking lot. Well, guess what? I'm going to bring it up to the venue. How is the venue going to show up for me? Because the way the venue shows up for me is the way I'm going to show up with them. And that's kind of slimmed down a lot of the places that I go to. But then I've started shifting my approach with that, because now I'm working with bigger venues like First Avenue, and our values don't align in a lot of ways. So I've said the mic is powerful, so guess at the end of the night, immediately, no transphobia on this dance floor. This is what we stand for. We take that power back in venues that might not align with us. We let them know that we are taking up larger spaces, that we're not at just a basement party anymore. We're at a venue that's like catering to 400 to 600 people. So that's extremely powerful. So it's like just kind of learning how to navigate those things. And it also sends a message to a lot of white supremacist groups like, hey, there's a lot more of us now. It's like we don't want to go down that path, but it's like I'm also someone that has history with gang violence. So there's a lot of intimidation tactics they use on me, on my partner, and like that's scary too, when they start targeting your loved ones. So for me, it's kind of like, well, I have the mic for a reason, and there's been a lot of people that unfortunately have passed because of having that voice, and I think we're aware of that, and we hate it, and we retreat. But like, if that were to happen, I know that I'm where I'm supposed to be, and that's kind of like the dark side of being a goth, is thinking about those dark thoughts. Sorry, guys.
They didn't know
Someone
that you know how to rock.
Someone bring it up, please.
I think it's beautiful that what you're talking about, the communities are merging. They're merging, right? It's so important that we have the T for T nights, that we have the blackout nights, that we have the femme only nights, etc., and that we have the nights where we merge as a Minneapolis community, because I do believe that we're stronger together. And what we're trying to do, I think, what we're all trying to do is shift culture. And shifting culture is like moving a tanker in a snowstorm, right? It's this huge thing. It's like trying to move like a huge pot of water, and the meniscus is like so big and so high, right? This balancing act. And like when Mama San was here at the Walker, it's like, this is like the most Black people I've ever seen in this space. This is the most queer and trans people I've ever seen in this space. So many people being like, oh, I haven't been here in like a decade. And we really felt that responsibility of like, this has to be a good experience. This has to be a good experience for our community, and it has to be a good experience for the Walker, and it has to be something that can like be sustainable, something that can be tenable. We don't want to pop in and show up at a huge institution with a huge endowment and have it be like a one and done thing, and not have it have like real community impact, and not have it actually change the institution. What we're interested in, what we're invested in, is long-term relationship, right? Relationality, right? Community, not as this abstract concept, but like who's in the room, like who's here right now. And so like for me, being transdisciplinary means I'm never not singing, I'm never not dancing, I'm never not a director, I'm never not a choreographer, I'm never not a facilitator, I'm never not a community organizer. And so like when I'm behind the bar, I bring all of that experience with me, and I've got my soft focus open, and I can see who's maybe on the brink of being overserved. I can see who's maybe in an exchange over here that looks like it could go left. I can see who's fucking with somebody they shouldn't be fucking with, right? And you care. You're nobody's mother, right? But you also are. You're a mom and you're not, right? And it's this weird nightlife in particular. I like to talk about home space and coalition space. Home space as this like place of overwhelming love, overflowing love, where like the teat never ends and there's always milk and honey in the fridge, right? And coalition space where it's like sometimes like your needs, like direct access needs, can't be centered right now because we're centering something else. We're all going to take a turn being uncomfortable, and that's going to be a part of it. And nightlife is this weird kind of in-between space where for a lot of people, those of us who didn't have parents, those of us who went to high school in the burbs, it becomes home space. And it is still coalition space because we are working to shift culture.
Amen.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, one kind of topic that seems to be bubbling up in different ways I'm kind of curious about is this relationship to power and spaces, because nightlife, like you mentioned, whether it's the Walker or at certain venues or bars or in a basement somewhere, you know, shifting between those two brings in a lot of different power dynamics, whether it's money or I guess ownership would fall into that too, or just sort of like the neighborhood or where it is. I'm just kind of curious if anyone on the panel has kind of thoughts around that, or maybe how you've navigated it or how you're thinking about it, whether it's shifting from one type of space to another, or just kind of reflecting and thinking about how the at times temporary space of the nightlife can impact that larger kind of power dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, queer people have such a rich history of being nomadic people, right? We are so often displaced from certain aspects of culture. You know, if you're queer and black, what do you lose? Displacement from home and from family and from religion, from city. Sometimes you have to flee. You know, I have friends who moved here because they had to move here from a different state. So there's that, right? Already as queer people who are the keepers of nightlife, let's be real, who are already nomadic. And we're nomadic because as burlesque performers, musicians, DJs, we're taking all our shit, we're loading it in, we're doing the thing, we're packing it up, we're loading it out. I, as a theater and dance practitioner, am so grateful for my time in burlesque because the same act, the same costume, different shape, different stage. I've done it here at the Walker. I've done it in the tiniest little 4x4 corner of a dive bar. And again, I want to talk about that transdisciplinary thing, right? If you can conceive of changing your entire act, your entire setup of your instruments, your entire set list for a different space, you can conceive of adapting how you move in a space. You can translate that discipline, right? Translate that form across disciplines. And so I think it's about like expanding your lens to be like, okay, what can shift? Like always being ready to be like, what has to shift in order for this to go the way it needs to go? I don't know. What do y'all think?
I agree with that. I think a lot of the work that I do with Teacup, Twin Cities United Performers, is I think as queer people, we are constantly in this like world building mindset of like, what can we actually bring and what can we envision for ourselves? And with Teacup, I get to bring a lot of that to that space because it is organizing musicians and performers, and we bring nightlife to wherever we go, and we bring queerness to wherever we go, but we aren't validated, and in a lot of these spaces, we aren't paid for the labor that we're doing. There are so many hours that go into actually putting on that show that just doesn't get accounted for. And so I think a lot about like the power, especially someone who grew up in like the DIY scene. Gully Boys started in basements in Como, and that is where I feel the most comfortable. We get to play the biggest stages in the world, and it's awesome. But when I play a basement, I'm like, this is where I actually feel like the most seen and heard, and I get to engage with people in like a real way. How can we bring that to like the first halves of the world? So I think like being loud about it, and like I don't care if I get blacklisted from every venue. There will always be a basement. There will always be a backyard space. I will make music no matter where I am, and I will be loud no matter where I am. But I also will be loud for the people who make the shows happen and the people who don't get to be on the mic. I have such a privilege to be on a microphone and speaking and engaging with people. So yeah, it's complex, and I think that's why every time I create an idea of something, it always starts at a house and it starts in a basement, because I feel like this is where everything that I know and have experienced is like, do it yourself. You know, no one knows better than yourself at how you want to do this. And like you can pull in different folks from your community where you don't really have that freedom to create when you're working with venues. You're told no a lot. And I don't like to be told no, to be frank. So that doesn't work for me. But I mean, I have to make it work, obviously, but I don't like that. So I want to create the spaces that I world build and envision. And I started at a home because I get to take care of my people in the way that I know how to take care of people, and not rely on venues to take care of them, because they often don't. And that sucks.
No, I agree with that. It's kind of like, it is this power dynamic, but for me, I feel like it's shifted, where it's like, I have some power, you know, because it's like, as a DJ, it's like, I always tell people Gothess is like a nightclub on wheels. So I can go anywhere I want to go, any venue I want to go. If shit hit the fan, just go to a different one. And they can count on the community showing up for me, you know. So a lot of that has kind of been a blessing to have that, where it's like, I can't imagine being in a band, because it's like you also have to consider everybody else, you know? And then for me, it's like the opposite. I'm bringing you this kind of like packaged, beautiful thing that is like my creative passion, and if you don't treat it right, I'm just gonna storm off, you know? But not necessarily storm off, I'm not that dramatic, but just, and it gives me a little bit of strength and power in negotiating with venues, where they're like, we've noticed you, we like what you're doing. You have a community that doesn't buy tickets, but they will show up day of. And I've gotten harassed by, like, a lot of the times the venues are like, hey, you know, there's no tickets, do this. And I'm like, you're not going to get them paying you like prepaid tickets. They're going to show up the night. And then they're like, well, no. And then I'm like, so it puts me in a place where I'm like, it stresses me out. But at the same time, I'm like, if they keep pushing, there's going to be another venue I can go. There could be another place that I can go. I don't feel where it's like I have to give into that power structure. If they don't like that I'm not responding as quickly, that's okay. It wasn't meant to be. I love my community. I have places that I go to that are smaller and intimate, and that works. So it's always a matter of time of finding, like, you know, the green room just opened up. You know, it's like all of these places that close, there's going to be something else that's going to bloom. So it's a matter of time. And I think venues are really starting to catch on to that, where it's just like, okay, we really want to hone in on some local talent, because there is other venues now that you can go. And if they see that you have like following, you know, a community following, it's like as soon as you have that kind of connection with your community, it's unbreakable. It's just going to keep growing. And I think a lot of, before the pandemic hit, it was the opposite. The community was neglected. And you saw what happened when the community was neglected. So now there's like a pivot to kind of reaching out towards the community and getting some of the people that have done a lot of work to work at these bigger places, to basically kind of bridge that gap. There's still a lot of work to be done, but for me, it's like, it is a power dynamic that I keep kind of like pushing against, or just being like, you know what, I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm not gonna let that email stress me out. I know what I have, I know the family that I have, I know the support that I have. If they keep going this way, it's not for me. It's not a big deal. And I think there's a lot of power in that, because it's like I'm not in a place now where it's like I need to hit every gig.
Yep.
And I love that. But there are also people that I am giving opportunities that I want them to hit every gig. So that's when the caretaker comes in, where it's just like, I really don't want to do this like night, but I'm going to do it because I have like my queer siblings that also need that platform. So a lot of it is just kind of learning that balance with like the power dynamic. But I really do think it's shifting, just because we're in those spaces now and we're kind of like saying like, okay, this is the way I see it. I don't see it the same way, but we can try and make this work. And right now it's working until it's not.
I think a lot of our power comes from problematizing. Like, I'm always trying to problematize the institution. Like, it's just true. We are always already in proximity to sex work. Always. So many of the girls that I came up with were club strippers, survival sex workers, camp girls, etc., yourself included. And like, even those of us who don't have that history, the proximity is high. The proximity is very high. So inherently, already, always problematizing when we're in spaces like this, because we bring that with us, we bring that history with us, we bring our communities with us. And I am not gonna sell out. When I go and work at the Guthrie, I'm a problem. When I come and work at the Walker, I'm a problem. We're gonna talk about it. And I don't mean problem like I'm gonna be a diva, or I'm gonna be a bitch, or whatever, right? There's a time and a place for some of that. But what I mean is pathway making. I'm at a place in my career now where I'm having a conversation with someone and I'm looking them in the eyes, and in my head I'm thinking, there's already 10 other people coming behind me who are not gonna have to have this conversation because I had this conversation. And you know, sometimes that means maybe you're not invited back. Sometimes that might cost you a bag, right? But it's worth it because you're educating. And even if the people that you're educating in that moment don't like it, don't want to hear it, or aren't really ready to receive the lesson, something's gonna click later. And I know that there are people who made those sacrifices for me before I got here. So when I think about that, when I remember that, it feels very easy for me to have that conversation in the interest of the future.
I love that, because it's true. It's like, I don't know if this happens to you, but it's like I'll have promoters that'll be like, hey, Marty, you worked at this venue. I heard some stories. I wanted to cross-check with you. And I'd be like, let me get the list. You know, and it's not me trying to cancel anyone. I don't even go on social media and cancel. I used to. Now I'm just like, I'm going to write it on the list. Because you know what? There's going to be a promoter who's going to be like, I heard this. Is it true? And I'm like, this is the way they treated me. And I'm going to tell you how they treated me. And then they're like, you know what? I trust your judgment. I'm not going to go there. So, and that's one of the things that, like, you know, venues should really pay attention to. It's like, we are your Yelp review.
Yeah.
So promoters, artists are checking in. And when I noticed that wave start happening, that people were checking in with me to be like, hey, you just did that gig at this place. How was it? And I'm like, they were great. They aligned with my values. Totally think they would be a good fit for you. Or it'll be the opposite side. Like, you know, that's just a hard no for me, and this is what happened. There's a lot of power in that, you know, and I realized, like, wow, I'm becoming like a Wikipedia for folks, where it's just like, let's see what's going on with Marty. And I'm wondering if that happens to both of you now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm intentionally trying to create that space through Teacup. And I think musicians and performers are inherent organizers. There's so much that has to happen in order to even see the show. things that have to go on behind the scenes. And so I think having that collective power of us even talking about it and talking about like how much people are being paid. Are you getting, is your art being valued? Or are they ripping you off? They're most likely ripping you off.
A little bit of both.
Do you feel safe? Are the venues accessible? Having those conversations, which I feel like often happen in like the back room, and you bitch and complain about it, and it feels good to have that release, but then nothing is done about it. And I feel like I'm noticing a lot more just like organizing and honestly unionizing in spaces that were not traditionally like unionized, and not just labor spaces, but now spaces where like we actually can't, this like the BS can't continue. And we're going to call you on it, and we're going to do something about it, because we actually have significantly more power when we are speaking and working together than individually. You're not going to blacklist all of us. You're going to blacklist the whole local scene. That's not going to work out for you. So yeah, standing together, and I feel, especially right now, post 2020, when we just like saw a lot of people come together and feel the power in calling out a lot of the abusive behaviors that were happening in specifically the music scene. Now, like, we're reflecting on that and organizing further, and like, how do we protect ourselves from these positions in the first place? How do we have each other's backs? Because we are the only ones who are like looking out for us right now. We are independent contractors. There's no one who has our back. We don't have employers who are providing us with X, Y, and Z. Like, it has to be us. And so like having these spaces to like talk about this and talk about it right now, it feels like, I don't know, and when I first started, that it was like shameful to do so. You just kind of like, you should be so grateful to have these opportunities, to have this exposure, to play on these stages. And that is true. I am grateful for those experiences, but I didn't deserve to be treated the way that I was treated through those experiences. And so I think being an encyclopedia and having those resources available for musicians, I think that protects so many young musicians who come into the scene and experience nightlife in this way, so they don't have to go through what we went through, and to be loud, so they don't have to be in the same ways. That feels just like really important to me, and like what I have been orienting to, especially in my how I'm navigating nightlife now as someone who has just kind of found their way into this position. I didn't necessarily seek it out, but now that I'm here, like having so much love, and I can't imagine myself doing anything else, feeling like this desire to protect the people that I'm inviting into this space and the people that I'm also creating within called community.
We're at a critical juncture, Kairos, the moment when the needle pulls through the weft, because institutions have started to apologize. And before, they would not apologize. They've started to apologize, and they've started to hire younger people, more Black people, more women, more queer and trans people. I mean, like, Taylor was like a huge part of Mama San coming to the Walker, and was really such a source of light for us in our time here. And that feels so good, right? And like, we had a great experience, like the whole team was great, but like Taylor really held it down for us in a number of ways. And the institution, once you admit that you fucked up, right? Like, now accountability is a part of the conversation. And so I've noticed a shift, even in just my 10 years, I've noticed a shift in how the institution responds. Because it used to be like what I was talking about earlier, right? Like, okay, we had the tough talk, and now I'm not invited back for 5 or 6 years, and I see younger people reap the benefits, and I'm so happy for that. But now some of those people have started to come back around and be like, hey, we miss you, we want you back. And I'm having conversations with people, and because these people are not older cis white men, because there's some empathy between us of experience, I can see the people I'm having the conversations with realize, like, oh, like, this is real. Like, harm happened, and this woman is talking to me this way because she cares. Not because she's mad or someone's in trouble or like she's a problem or whatever, but because this is real to her. And that we actually are aligned in our goals, that we have the same goals of shifting the culture. And that what that means sometimes is, ouch, oops. What that means sometimes is not going onto Facebook and doing the whole cancel brigade, right? It means humility. Because there is no one more zealous than the recent convert. But the older you get, And the more you become aware of the history of the movements that came before you and your place in that lineage, the more you realize you can't be burning bridges. We gotta come back around and we gotta be okay, like, hey, listen, that hurt. Don't talk to me like that. That's not a thing I do. And you have to be willing to receive that as well in return. Baby, the amount of times that I have been at First Avenue, at what's it called now? Luminary Arts, used to be called the Lab, whatever venue, where they said you cannot have gender neutral bathrooms. And we showed up with duct tape and paper and taped over the signs, and then their security tore it down, and we had someone go right back and put it up, and that was just a part of the protocol of the night, was having someone who was at those bathrooms just taping it back up, because what are you gonna do, cancel the show? We sold 1,000 tickets. What do you want? The community showed up. Because power is also what? Capital, proximity, right? And what I want, my hope, and like, okay, this is not an abolitionist framework. This is within like the confines of like the capitalist structure that we live in and like the funding structures that exist in Minneapolis and Minnesota, which I do not see changing in the next 50 years. What I want is for Nightlife to be able to have the same access to grant funding that my work in theater and dance does. Yes. Because I have been a self-employed artist for the last 6 years. I'm a grant girly. The Minnesota State Arts Board, the Minnesota Regional Arts Council, the Jerome Foundation, the McKnight Foundation, P-Fund, all kinds of stuff, all the other stuff, Fund for Transgenerations, all kinds of stuff, right? All these little foundations here and there. They won't fund the girls, the dolls, honey. The balls are being thrown by community. Now imagine if the ball could get that same 50K from so-and-so that the Celtic whatever got. No shade to the Celtics. I'm about to be on that contract in 2 months, so no shade. If you're in the room, I respect it. But what I want is for us to be able to get the same kind of funding that we get for our other work. And why is it that I'm valued when I'm at Red Eye Theater, when I'm at the Guthrie Theater, and the show starts at 7, but the same artist with the same connections and the same history and resume, et cetera, you don't want to fund the show that I want to make if it's going to happen at 11 p.m., if it's not family friendly. What is family friendly? This has never been and will never be family friendly. I don't know what to tell you. So that's what I want.
I want those grants too. You know, I think that's one of the things when it comes to opportunities for us. It's like we create the opportunities and we don't have a lot of resources.
Also, it's so hard to write a grant. That is like an inaccessible thing
I
in of
know.
itself. I don't know how to write a grant. Just give me the money.
It's like you got to
I got
get.
cool
The
ideas.
real dream is no
comments.
more grants, just give
No
us the
more
money.
I know, because it's like duct tape only goes so far. You know, it's like a lot of the equipment that I use, it's mine. It's my equipment. Limited resources. I got a fog machine. I got a triangle that I made that lights up, and visuals. And I just go to every venue, and they're like, "We can make all the lights," and I'm like, "I just want it to be dark, red, and let the fog talk." And the triangle. It's like a beacon. And at first I felt like, because, you know, dark energy was going around when I was Gothess, you know, and those nights were completely the opposite. It was like big statement, photography, lighting, and then here I am going to like places like Honey that don't exist anymore with just a triangle, fog, and requesting, turn off all the lights and give me a candle, you know? So for a while I realized limitation is a really great thing for artists. I mean, I grew up with a lot of limitations and made incredible art from it. So I started realizing I don't need all of the lights and the glamour. I just need my triangle, my fog machine, and darkness. but one of the things too is like that only goes so far when you realize that a lot of the things that you're investing in, you're putting in that work. You're trying to get funding for it. You're working multiple jobs, to carry that together. And I really wish that there was more grants for like DJs. And it's really hard too, It's kind of one of those things where I wish we're more valued. But, we're still kind of scrapping it. And it is ridiculous because it's like at some point, I don't want to be, and I think we will be, I don't know, kind of one of those artists when you get up to your like 70s and everybody just like, you're all over books and magazines, but you live in a tiny studio, and it's like that carries on with just any type of like art form, really, unfortunately, where that I wish would change more, where there was more funding and more opportunities for us. So that part I'm still trying to figure out how to make the shift. And the only thing I'm thinking is like what we kind of sometimes do as a collective, we want to at some point invest in a space, but there's also a lot of complicated feelings with spaces because it's like I've had it many times where I'm like, I just need a space that it could be our home and we can foster a lot of creativity, but then you also have to think about, well, is it going to be a bar? There's also addiction in our communities. It's a lot of complicated feelings on getting spaces as well,
Why is it that we have to also be accountants and landlords and know about zoning issues, et cetera? Because I know dozens of artistic directors who don't have to do that. They do the curation, they do the producing, they do the directing, but they don't have to do all of that. And when we start to talk about buying space, it's like we have to know how to do all this other shit that is not a part of our artistry, our form. And it shouldn't have to be. We're culture bearers. We are culture bearers. Point blank, period. This is ceremonial war paint. And like, for that to not be acknowledged, but for Shakespeare to continue to have so much funding, it's crazy.
I agree. And that's the complicated part where it's like my mindset is on that, every single time where I'm like, I'm going to be 50 at some point. I don't want to be up on the stage DJing. It's like I'm thinking ahead. What does it look like ahead for the nightlife? And I'm thinking about like spaces and how complicated that is to get into and how we don't have the resources or people kind of investing in that. We just have people that are trying to kind of distract us to bring community and capital to their spaces. So, there is that conversation that I have in my head often about that, and I still don't have any answers, it's a back and forth. Mm-hmm.
I personally believe that the money exists. The money's always out there. And it's just
Bring
a matter
it.
of shifting it towards artists doing exactly what they're doing and not like hiring an artist just to paint a mural about climate change, but like funding an artist to do exactly what they're doing because that's radical in of itself. So like just shifting that narrative feels like one of the things that I'm focusing on so much right now because the money exists. I've seen budgets. There's so much money. And why don't we have access to it? We should. We should have.
I want some of that money.
We were thinking maybe if there's any questions from the audience.
Don't be shy.
Something that I feel like everyone's touched on in different ways, whether it's like being displaced from religion or doing pastoral care, world building, it's been this sort of what I think of as like this spiritual element to nightlife. And I was wondering if any of y'all be able to speak to that more, like the pastoral element, the world building, the like this kind of place people go to almost transcend in a way.
Well, I guess for me, it's like I grew up with a very religious family. I think we've been in every single religion, so even a Jehovah's Witness at some point, which is a cult. And it's interesting, but a lot of some of those spiritual things that I learned as young really spoke to me, you know. And I felt like a lot of unconditional love and hearing some of, like, you know, hymns and biblical quotes that sound nothing to what you have fundamentalists preaching, unfortunately. And I think my mom's journey really kind of like helped me with that, even though she was pretty much like, you're queer, we are not gonna talk about it, you know. But a lot of those kind of things kind of like stuck with me, and I felt like, I don't know, I felt like anytime I was in spaces, I always felt like I needed to make people feel seen and accepted. And I saw that as a blessing, you know? It is a very spiritual blessing to be that. And for me, just kind of like being in the spotlight with things that I'm doing, some of those stories come in my head on how to, you know, show love, how not to be scornful, how to have humility, how not to be a know-it-all, you know, having wisdom and discernment. Like, those things are very powerful in any way that you navigate life. So whether you have a higher power, whether you read tarot, there's something wonderful that kind of fills you up when you're feeling empty. And that's kind of how I see every time that I'm in a space with community. I want to fill it up. I don't want to drain it. I want to be a blessing to others around me. I don't want to be a burden. And a lot of it is just love, really. So, yeah, hopefully that helps answering that question.
I grew up in the church against my will. But I think when I was younger, I was like really into worship music. I was like, this rules. Why am I crying? Why are my hands in the air? And I realized I was like, oh, it's actually like just the music. I love music, and I love being in a space where we're all feeling something together, and we're all crying and we're all hallelujahing. And I don't believe it, but there was something so powerful about that, like that moment, that like being a musician now, I like think about that, and being able to share music in a space with people who are all there because they love the same thing, they love being in community. That feels like my church. That's how I have created and held on to that piece of church that I did love, being in community with people, caring about people, and enjoying music. That's how I brought it into like the spaces that Gully boys everywhere. It's our queer church, and we make every space hallelujah if we can.
It feels so clear. The parallels feel so incredibly clear. I grew up in the Southern Baptist tradition. My great-grandfather was the president of the Southern Baptist Texas Convention for 12 years and the vice president of the Southern Baptist Convention National for like 18 years. Sick, vile, like crazy, evil cult. And I was a child minister. I spread the gospel. I was preaching to kids on the school bus. I mean, can you tell? Like, and so like hosting, emceeing, you know, shows was not far off, right? The almost the beaten path that was laid out before me. I also am the third in a long line of women who were black sheep in my family. My grandmother was estranged in her own way, my mother in her own way, and I am estranged from all of them entirely because I couldn't do it. And neither could they. It was mutual. And I think that the skills that I developed in terms of leadership and of knowing the power of the mic and the power of testimony and of scripture, they're still integral to my work to this day, right? Sometimes it's not the door, it's the frame. So like the tools are still viable, right? It's about the mission. I mean, the preacher is the MC, and the tip jar is the offering plate. The preacher is the DJ. The preacher is the drummer. Right? The spirit dancers are the go-go girls. The altar is the triangle. It feels quite clear. And we all often, queer people, have so much religious trauma. And so finding a space where we can engage in collective communal movement, where we can raise our hands, where we can sway, where we can cry, where we can sweat together, where you turn and you say hi and hug your neighbor, where you take the little thing and you drink it and you break the little thing and you eat it. Like, it's all there, right? It's just like, it's not a wafer, it's poppers.
I agree, it's a ritual. That's exactly what that is, and it's kind of beautiful seeing it translated in a different way. We're like appropriating that, we're dealing with the trauma that we have and appropriating it in a beautiful way, you know, and it still leads people's lives, and it really kind of does fill that cup, but it is beautiful.
I would go so far as to say reclaiming.
Love it. Thank you for that question.
Any other questions in the audience?
I like to use the term party top. I have part in Tea for Tea and bringing that dream come alive. And it seems like all of you are definitely party tops. Clearly, what is a bit of advice for like newer party tops of Minneapolis that you want to pass on?
Keep holding the mic. Honestly, that's a start. That takes courage. It's like, I know that we kind of like, oh, well, it's just a question. I'm like, that takes courage. It's like, probably at your age, I would have been like ridden with anxiety and just passed the mic. That takes courage, just that action right there. So you're there.
I would say do the research. I would say invest critically in the history of this space and of other spaces. Don't dismiss things offhand just because you don't identify with them, right? Embrace disidentification. Embrace being misread. Find how to subvert, how to queer disidentification, and how to queer misreading. There's a lot that I didn't want to look at because it was so white or it was so trans-exclusionary, et cetera. But there are babies in that bathwater, you know? And I think it takes a kind of humility and a kind of swallowing of pride to kind of be like, you know what? Like, identity is important, but it is certainly not everything. It is certainly not everything. And I think that what I really maybe am talking about is humility. And I think that your question belies immense humility. So the way that Maria is saying, hold on to the mic, I would say, hold on to that humility and that desire to like know what other people have to say about the work that we're all doing together as party tops.
I think my piece of advice is to take care seriously. As we invite people into these spaces to party and to release, we have to care for them. If we want people to feel vulnerable and to feel the ecstasy and the joy, we have to hold them in that so they can come back and they can continue to feel that. And if we don't take that seriously, it becomes dangerous and it can spiral out of control. But yeah, that's the caretaker. That's a serious role.
Don't let that discourage you, though.
Yeah. All of this, the same like care and nuance and attention and alertness that you bring to topping elsewhere in your life, right? Bring it to the party.
Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time, but I wanted to make sure we had time and space for all of our panelists to maybe let us know what they have coming up.
Go ahead.
I have a show coming up. I'm premiering a new work, MILF Feeds Baby Deer, 100% real. You can imagine what that's about. At Red Eye Theater, June 13th, 14th, and 15th. It's a shared evening with Damian Strange. Please do come. I'll be performing alongside Pedro Pepa and Emily Gastineau.
We just announced the third Queer Mud Wrestling, which is on August 31st at Hiawatha Supply. It's a landscaping supply company. They got the dirt. So yeah, it's for everybody. You don't have to be a wrestler, but if you want to get messy and muddy, it's for you. And it's for performance. And it's for creating a different persona and being whoever you want to be and playing in the mud.
Love it. Let's see. Gothess is at Mort's every last Friday. So you could find us there. That's like the residency. It's small, intimate. I hope some of you can make it. Next week, we have a special nautical theme, Goth Night. So, yeah, I love that too. I spring out and bring bubbles, not just fog for that one. So it'll be at the Hook and Ladder. So yeah, it's kind of like within the community. I love it when it's like south and I get to go to different places. In July, I'll be at the Turf Club and I'm having a kind of Gotham theme night. So it'll be New Wave versus Dark Wave. And you can come dressed, you know, and whatever you think is Gotham to you. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people dressed as Joker and Harley Quinn. I'm expecting that. Plus, they do have a clown bar. So I just felt like it would fit appropriately. But yeah, you know, there's stuff coming out in the works. I'm excited to just have a great summer with everybody.
Where can we find Gothess online?
You can find Gothess online on Instagram, and that's Gothess MPLS. Please follow. I'm also on Facebook.
Yeah, you are.
But yes, please follow.
I'm on Instagram as Resher Chef. RECHERCHEFFE. RECHERCHEFFE.
I'm on Instagram at Nadirah McGill, NADIRAHMCGILL. My band is Gully Boys Band, and Queer Mud Wrestling is MPLS Queer Mud Wrestling. If you type in MPLS queer anything, there's so many sports that pop up after that. So if you're a queer jock like myself, you can really get plugged in easily by just typing in those few words.
Well, thank y'all so much. I feel so fulfilled and so privileged to have shared space with y'all this evening. Thank you all so much for joining us. And please do come back for our panel on July 11th. Other than that, please have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.